A dealer in Florida has a brand new 150 horsepower outboard sitting in his showroom right now that he is legally not allowed to sell because the manufacturer itself issued a recall on it and the fix hasn't been documented on that specific unit yet. Another outboard sold for over $150,000 new, and today the same engine, immaculate, low hours, cannot find a buyer at any price because the entire company that built it does not exist anymore. A third brand was once the second biggest outboard maker in America, discontinued so completely that boaters Googling the name today mostly find forum posts asking what happened to it. None of these are hypothetical. All 9 are sitting on lots and in listings right now, in 2026, priced by sellers who haven't caught up to what actually happened to the badge on the cowling. We're ranking 9 outboard motors dealers genuinely cannot move this year, starting with the ones that are simply a hard sell, and ending with the ones that are functionally worthless regardless of condition. Please subscribe if this video is helpful. Number 9. Any carbureted or electronically injected 2-stroke outboard that does not carry a 3-star or cleaner emissions rating is now unsellable on a growing list of California lakes and reservoirs, not statewide, but county by county and lake by lake. San Luis Reservoir gave boaters a 3-year phase-out window before banning non-compliant 2-strokes outright starting in August of 2016, and more lakes have adopted similar ordinances since. The engines themselves are not necessarily broken. A carbureted 2-stroke can dump up to 30% of its fuel unburned straight into the water, which is exactly the number regulators cite when writing these local rules. And direct injection 2-strokes built since 1999 are specifically exempted because they don't have that problem. A dealer in a state without these restrictions can still move a non-compliant 2-stroke without issue. A dealer near a restricted reservoir is stuck holding an outboard that is legal in the driveway and illegal on the exact water it was bought for. Number 8. Pre-2006 carbureted 2-stroke outboards as a broader category are fighting a losing battle against their own paperwork. Strict EPA emission standards phased out new carbureted 2-stroke production by around 2006, which means every one of these engines still on a dealer's used rack is now roughly 20 years old at minimum, with a design nobody manufactures new anymore. Parts sourcing gets harder every year as the pool of donor engines shrinks and manufacturers stop stocking obsolete carburetor kits and ignition modules. Buyers increasingly assume 2-stroke means smoky and outdated regardless of actual condition, and a dealer trying to move one is competing against a wall of cheap, EPA-compliant 4-strokes that didn't exist when the 2-stroke was built and now dominate every price bracket it used to own. Number 7. Any Nissan Marine badged outboard is now selling on borrowed time. Nissan Marine was discontinued as a brand in 2014, and for its entire run in North America, it was actually built by Tohatsu under a joint manufacturing agreement, meaning the badge itself never represented independent engineering in the first place, right down to the block castings and lower units. Genuine Tohatsu parts still cross-reference to many Nissan badged units, which keeps these from being fully orphaned the way an OMC product is, but more than a decade after the badge disappeared, most buyers under 40 have never heard of it, and a dealer has to explain the Tohatsu connection just to justify the asking price before the conversation even gets to the engine's actual condition. Number 6. Mariner Outboards just became fully, permanently discontinued worldwide, and most owners never saw it coming. Mercury pulled Mariner from the US market back in 1999, but kept selling it internationally as a lower-priced companion brand for another quarter century, with the badge originally launched in Australia in 1974 and built on genuine Yamaha engineering before an FTC ruling against the Mercury-Yamaha joint venture pushed it toward becoming mechanically identical to Mercury by the mid-90s, a convergence mechanics nicknamed the Mercaha. In February of 2025, Mercury's UK distributor notified dealers that new four-stroke Mariners for the leisure market would stop production entirely, closing the book on a brand that outlived its own American discontinuation by 26 years. A used Mariner still shares enough Mercury DNA to get serviced at a Mercury dealer, but the badge itself is now completely dead everywhere on Earth, and dealers holding new old stock Mariner inventory are sitting on a brand that technically no longer exists anywhere in the world. Number 5. The entire Chrysler to Force lineage is one continuous story of a budget outboard slowly running out of road. West Bend built the original engineering in the 1960s, secretly manufacturing Sears Elgin-badged outboards along the way. Chrysler bought the division in January of 1965 and turned it into a real competitor to Mercury and OMC, reaching nearly 29% of the entire U.S. Marine market at its mid-70s peak out of a 590,000 square foot Wisconsin plant. When Chrysler exited the marine business during its own 1984 government bailout, Bayliner's U.S. Marine division bought the design and renamed it Force. Brunswick, Mercury's parent company, inherited Force in 1986, kept it alive as a budget option bundled with Bayliner boat packages, closed the original Hartford, Wisconsin plant after a labor dispute in 1990, and moved production onto Mercury's own assembly line, and finally discontinued the brand in 1999 once EPA emissions rules made the aging cross-scavenged two-stroke design too expensive to keep updating. The youngest Force outboard on the water today is over 25 years old, and Mercury-compatible components can still be found through dealers. But the original Chrysler architecture parts increasingly mean eBay listings, salvage yards, and specialists who stocked up years ago, knowing the well would eventually run dry. Number 4. A Mercury 4-stroke Pro XS, or C-Pro, between 75 and 150 horsepower built between 2011 and 2025, is not just hard to sell, it is illegal to sell until a specific fix is completed. Mercury issued Safety Recall Service Bulletin 2025-11 in May of that year, after identifying a stud on the upper shift shaft arm that can corrode in saltwater use and cause a total loss of shift function, meaning the engine can silently stop responding to gear changes offshore with no warning. The company directed owners not to operate affected engines at all until dealers installed a retainer bracket and began re-greasing the assembly every 100 hours going forward, and the dealer network is handling the fix at no cost to owners. That still covers 14 model years of engines across 3 separate product lines. Once the fix is documented, the engine is fine, and Mercury's own warranty and dealer network make the repair straightforward. But any dealer holding unfixed inventory in that window is holding motors the law says cannot change hands, and any private seller who doesn't know the recall exists is about to have a very uncomfortable conversation with a buyer's surveyor. Number 3. Evinrude's collapse is the biggest name on this list, and it happened almost overnight. Ole Evinrude built the first commercially viable outboard motor back in 1907. The brand survived a bankruptcy under its former parent, Outboard Marine Corporation, and got picked up by BRP in 2000. Then, on May 27th of 2020, BRP announced it was immediately discontinuing all Evinrude outboard production, laying off around 400 employees at the Sturtevant, Wisconsin plant. The company cited COVID-19 supply chain damage on top of years of shrinking market share against 4-stroke competitors it never fully matched, and the timing caught almost everyone off guard since Evinrude had released updated E-Tech G2 models as recently as 2019. It wasn't Evinrude's first stumble either. Earlier that same year, BRP had already recalled more than 11,000 of its 200 and 225 horsepower engines for a separate defect, an attempt to rebuild trust in the brand just months before the brand stopped existing. BRP has committed to supplying parts for roughly 10 to 15 years after discontinuation, and even signed a deal to have Mercury, its former direct rival, power BRP's own boat brands going forward. That parts window is exactly why Evinrude ranks where it does and not lower. The support hasn't run out yet, but every year that passes narrows it, and buyers already know there is no factory building new ones ever again. Number 2. Outboard Marine Corporation, the company behind the Johnson name, didn't just discontinue a model. It went bankrupt entirely in 2000, ending over 90 years of continuous production under that badge and taking down one of the 2 biggest names in American outboards in a single filing. At its peak, OMC was the largest outboard manufacturer in the world, running Johnson alongside its own Evinrude line as a deliberate 2-brand strategy meant to outflank Mercury on dealer floor space, essentially forcing dealers to choose sides in a fight OMC controlled both ends of. Everything built before that collapse has now been orphaned for a quarter century, which is long enough that even experienced mechanics increasingly treat a used Johnson as a parts sourcing project before they treat it as a repair job. BRP acquired select assets out of the bankruptcy and used them to keep Evinrude alive for another 2 decades. But the Johnson name itself never came back in any form, and no comparable brand has stepped in to formally support it since. A dealer taking one of these in on trade isn't pricing a used engine, he's pricing how many hours of searching salvage yards and online forums it will take just to keep the thing running for the next buyer. Number 1. Nissan Marine built the most powerful outboards ever put into production, founded in 2010 in Germantown, Wisconsin, using small block General Motors LSA V8 engines, supercharged and freshwater cooled for the kind of corrosion protection normally reserved for full inboard diesels, pushed as high as 627 horsepower. These were marketed, without much exaggeration, as the most advanced outboards ever built, selling new for anywhere between $130,000 and over $150,000 each. Volvo Penta bought a majority stake in 2017, moved production to Lexington, Tennessee, and announced in November of 2020 that it was discontinuing the entire outboard line effective January 1st, 2021, citing the company's push toward net zero emissions technology across the whole Volvo group. That leaves a tiny, ultra-premium production run spanning barely a decade of manufacturing, now permanently orphaned at the exact price point where buyers expect factory backing that no longer exists. Volvo Penta pledged to honor existing warranties and parts, but a $150,000 outboard with no future production run and a shrinking service network is the purest version of unsellable on this entire list. Too expensive to be an impulse buy, too rare to have a real resale market, and too specialized for most shops to even want the job. So here's the pattern. Numbers 9 through 5 are engines punished by paperwork, regulation, and shrinking parts support, but every one of them still has a path to a sale if the buyer knows what they're getting into and the price reflects it. Numbers 4 through 1 are a different category entirely, engines that are either legally frozen, corporately extinct, or priced so far outside a shrinking parts ecosystem that condition stops mattering. Notice that not one engine on this list failed because the underlying design was bad. The force lineage was simple and cheap because that's what it was built to be. Nissan Marine was arguably the single most advanced outboard ever engineered. Evinrude was still releasing updated models the year before it disappeared. What killed every single one of these was something happening around the engine, a regulation, a corporate decision, a bankruptcy, a recall, not a flaw inside the block itself. Before you buy any used outboard from this list, or sell one, check for open recalls by serial number directly with the manufacturer's website, not the seller's word, since a recall doesn't show up on a compression test. Ask whether the badge on the cowling is still a company that exists in any form, because a Nissan, a Mariner, a Force, a Johnson, and an Evinrude all answer that question differently, and the difference changes what a fair price actually looks like. Call a dealer or specialist who actually stocks parts for that specific badge before you commit to a number, Not just a general marine mechanic, because I can probably find parts and I have parts on the shelf right now, are two very different positions to buy into. And get a real parts availability check before you fall in love with the price, because on every engine on this list, the sticker was never the problem, the support behind it was. If this video helped, hit subscribe and let us know which of these you've owned or which model you think we missed. Stay smart on the water.